All right, one other issue I want to talk to you about.
Yes.
The ACLU. One of the things that the ACLU just came out with a new policy on representing hate groups that are seeking permits.
Yes.
Because the ACLU Virginia, the state branch, defended these guys, and literally defended them in their court case to get a permit to march.
Yes.
And they are now, I guess, looking at and have revised their policy on this, that if these groups are seeking to march with firearms, they will no longer take that case.
Right. I have a well.
Well, give me your take on it, because obviously
Do you want to unleash me? Because I have a whole lot to say
please.
Here. To me, this covers a number of issues, and I will say, actually, I've found very fascinating. I can't say which one, but I'm on one of these, listservs for lefty types, and there's been a big debate over this. It's interesting. So I'll start by saying, first of all, I've written a lot about guns and the role they play in our society, and that's one of the themes I've talked about I think for a number of years now, is that the increasing level of gun ownership. In other words, gun ownership has been going down, but the core group of people, this is why the NRA does their crazy right-wing marketing, they've been buying more guns. So you've got fewer and fewer groups of people who are buying guns, but they're building arsenals. I bet you can guess which types of people they are for the most part. And the open carry laws, they've been trying to force down everybody's throats in various states. So guys don't even have to have any kind of a background check or permit to carry a gun openly in the public sphere. And that's about changing what our democracy is. The whole point of a democracy is ballots, not bullets. And we, right up there with the various other rights in the First Amendment, is the right to assembly. And I'd be scared. I wouldn't, I would tell you right now, I wouldn't take my kids to one of these types of rallies anymore. I mean, and that's because, you may get a terrible thing happen, like the guy who drove a car through people and ended up murdering somebody. But that's a lot harder to do. It's really easy with the modern weaponry that we are allowing any Yahoo to get, an AR-15, to spray an entire crowd and murder 50 people in 30 seconds. You know what I mean? And so it's a chilling effect on democracy, all right, on peaceful expression. And that is a huge problem. So I'm glad the ACLU acknowledged that, because
it's a chilling effect on the First Amendment too. I mean, these two rights are in conflict in this situation.
That's right. And that's a key. Obviously, that one came first. And so, but even the exercise of democracy, we've now had at least 2 reported cases during the last election of some of these guys hanging out with their assault weapons near polling places. Now, what's the message there? So in the free expression of our, in many ways of our democracy, right away, there's a chilling effect. And I think that's why I think open carry should be banned everywhere as a common sense for numerous reasons. But on top of that, I will say, I'm sorry, I know there are First Amendment fundamentalists out there, but we do have when the ACLU started defending some of these groups like the Nazis and Skokie and whatever, we were at a different point in the pendulum where we are now. That we've had courts that have argued that money is speech. I mean, they've come out in favor of free speech in all sorts of venues where people thought it didn't exist before. And I'm simply saying that there are other democracies that do this differently than we do, and they seem to do fine. I'm not trying to curtail speech, but we already have laws, and theoretically, against terroristic threats and harassment and intimidation. These are things you're not allowed to do with your speech. Well, what were these Nazis doing if they weren't doing that? And of course, they were doing nothing any different than yelling fire in a crowded theater. And so to me, what's the point where the ACLU has limited resources and raised God knows how much money, millions, when Trump was arrested? You're going to spend your time and money on this? And not to mention, these are the folks, this is, if anything, is white privilege. These are white guys who, if African Americans were to come out dressed the way they're dressed with guns, what do you think would happen? All
Well,
right, they don't have any trouble speaking. Let me just finish this one thing,
okay.
Sam, and then you
Go
can
ahead.
tear it apart if you want. But they have never had a problem speaking in our society. In fact, theirs have always been by far the loudest voices. So to me, to spend your time and resources on that when there may be, much more, marginal groups of African Americans or transgender or whatever group who needs your time and needs your money. I know it's about a broader principle, but I wish they would apply that broader principle and they would show up in places for other people before thinking about neo-Nazis. There's my spiel.
I mean, if you're making an argument that it's about resource allocation, you really have to do two things. One, you have to sort of cite some evidence that they're not showing up for other people in those situations. And B, you also have to make an argument that, for a group that is founded specifically to protect First Amendment rights, that somehow reprioritizing would further that goal. I mean, I have obviously I don't like it, but I think the ACLU has an important role in representing people. Now, I happen to also think, though, that it's perfectly consistent with that role to say we're not going to represent people who are planning to bring guns to a protest like this because it has a chilling effect on what our primary objective is, which is to protect the First Amendment rights. And there was a great piece in the Times by the president of Everytown for gun safety.
Yep.
Saying that,
on Feinblatt, yeah.
Saying that it's perfectly legit, and there are instances where states, even I think he cited Alabama, suspends its open carry rights in that state for large assemblies, because there's a fundamental difference between having a right to carry your handgun and then also walking into
showing up in a group of 20 or 50 or 100
where
or
everyone
1,000
is explicitly attempting to plan to do that because it's sending a different signal. I mean, the idea, frankly, I also don't know why it should be legal for people to be wearing these type of military uniforms in this circumstance.
That too.
Because you had people on the street who assumed that those 3%ers were law enforcement, were representatives of the state, and were there to protect them. And that is a public safety problem. I mean, look, on New York City streets, even if I'm doing, when I'm shooting beat cops, a half-hour comedy, and John Benjamin and I are in cop uniforms, we have to be within 15 or 20 feet of the cops who are with us because we're not allowed to walk around, even though we have play guns and whatnot, because it's a danger. People could come up to us and assume, like, get that bad guy. Or, and
knowing you'd probably do it.
Well, no, I would have. Benjamin would have run the other way. But no, but the bottom line is, like, we have laws like this. It's not an infringement upon my freedom of speech that I can't go around and pretend I'm a cop. I can go around and I can pretend I'm a dentist. I can go around, on the streets and walk around.
I still have to say, beyond what you're saying, Sam, that I feel strongly about asking the question of when speech stops being speech and becomes threats and becomes hate speech, and if that is speech that really deserves to be protected. And, again, I would protect anybody's right to get up and say whatever it is. And we believe this, we believe that. But that with these groups, it always is about threats and overt, I don't know. I don't see that as free speech. And frankly, we regulate that as not free speech in certain circumstances. You can't threaten the president's life. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. We've made those distinctions. And we've made distinctions about inciting riot. Are you not inciting riot when you're doing that? I don't know.
I mean,
some of those guys pretty clearly and pretty, on tapes I've seen, call for people to attack other people. That's inciting riot. I don't know. That's where I come down on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think look, it's obviously there is no, part of the problem with this, there is no bright line, right? I mean, there is, and it becomes very difficult to set that line, and it can be a creeping line, and I think that's part of the issue. So, I mean, I'm not a free speech absolutist, but I am not concerned with. Well, I shouldn't say that.
I think a democracy is about balance. It's where you find that balance. It's kind of like, if you believe in the Second Amendment, you believe, there was a right for people who were well regulated by the government and could be called up to serve in a militia, to understand how to use firearms, and to have a willingness and ability to do that. And I do believe that even in a modern society, it could potentially have some applications. I mean, obviously the National Guard, but it could potentially even beyond that. But it's where you get from that to any idiot who's never had any training, and it can open carry, that you've lost all balance. Obviously, I don't think we've come nearly as close as losing all that balance in the First Amendment as we have with the Second Amendment. But I do think that we've gone a little bit to the extremes of speech that we
I think it's a function of the weapons. I mean, I really do, because I think, the reason why these guys bring weapons to these rallies is because they know they're outnumbered. They know that they are not as intimidating as they want to be, because they know if they show up and it's just those yahoos with the torches, and it's reprehensible, and people should be making them pariahs in society. I have no doubt about that. But in terms of their right to assemble that way, they know it's not intimidating enough, that society is at a position now where there are going to be more counter protesters. And that's why they got to bring the guns, because it's not, I mean, it's horrible. It harkens back to a time that is real, and is also reminds people of real dynamics that go on in our society today. But the fact that they got to show up with weapons, and that's why they have their rallies where they have them, right? Where it's open carry places, is because they know they're not they don't strike the same fear into the people, into the hearts of the people they want to strike fear into. And that's why they need the weapons there. And that's where I think you take away the weapons, and you maintain that free speech. They're right in those circumstances, and these are pretty narrow circumstances I'm talking about. I'm not talking about at work. You can get fired for that at work because of and at work it's a far different situation where it's a lot more. It's harassment. It's intimidating. It's silencing people. And silencing their expression in many respects, by doing that. But when it comes to like marching in a public park, as long as there isn't this other factor that chills other people's speech in a way that creates a different power dynamic. I mean, I think that's important. And that's why, frankly, that's what the Antifa does, is that they also, that's what the Antifa does in their presence is, I think philosophically, I don't want to speak for anybody, is to make sure that power dynamic is balanced out, right? Like that your physical threat is
set some more
negated.
Limits. Yeah. To me, I'd find the balance in saying if there's anything that is akin to terroristic threats or inciting violence, you've lost that right at that moment. And you need to know that going in to these speaking engagements. If you just want to talk about how white power is great, wonderful. Go knock yourself out. But if you want to get up and say, we need to defeat the inferior races and certain verbiage that encourages people to attack people, to me, that's where they've lost me. And I don't think that's protected speech.
And I will say this. The reason why what Donald Trump did was so dangerous and reprehensible is because those free speech and these issues are not, crystal clear. And that is why you need leadership and some type of normative values operating, particularly from the President of the United States, so that we can, because, one way that I know places handle this is that they will deny a permit to a march like this in a let's say a public park and say you can only march on at the federal building, the federal like a square, because in that federal square there is no open carry, right? And so it forces them to be separate from their guns. And it allows for a better way to contain them, by the cops, and make sure that the cops are able to keep these two groups apart. And you could argue, like, well, wait, that is an infringement on their First Amendment rights. Like you're coming up with a scheme to avoid violence and to protect people and to chill their freedom of expression. And to some extent you are, but that's because the line of free speech here is big and blurry. It's not precise. And so we need to do those things.
And that's why you always need to find a balance. And and again, that's why people like you and I might disagree where that balance is, and it needs to be argued and fought out in courts. And you hope that judges and come to the best, the best place of where the balance is of providing the most speech possible for people while preventing threat to others.
Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos